join our talk today. I know there's so many things to join and to visit and to see, so I'm very happy that you find this little quiet moment in all this big happening and be with us and listen to the artist talk with Paolo Chiasera, the artist. He's here right next to me. And Chris Sharp, he's a curator and writer critic from Mexico. He runs his own space there. It's called Lulu. If you're interested to Google it, you can find some information. And I'm very happy that Chris was willing to look into this exhibition. He also wrote a very good press release, which you're welcome to read afterwards, or you maybe already saw it, and framed the exhibition very nicely, which Paolo conceptually created. So I leave you to the talk of the two, and I'm myself curious. So enjoy.
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction. I tend to be a soft speaker, so if you can't hear me, just let me know. But it doesn't seem like that should be a problem here, like good acoustics. But anyhow, yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to do this, to be here, and to look at and think about Paolo's work in this exhibition. In general, I guess basically the way the talk will go is we'll, I'll talk a little bit about this, and then we'll talk about this exhibition, try and contextualize it within the practice of Paolo, and then maybe open it up to questions. So it probably shouldn't be all that long. But to start with, I guess what I wanted to say about this, and I guess where I hope this talk will go, is that basically I don't totally understand this work. I don't understand it 100%, and I actually think this is a good thing. I don't think this is a bad thing. I think it's an exhibition, and then also in your practice, it's something where you see kind of all the components. It's kind of evident. They go together. I mean, essentially, and Paolo will talk a lot more about this, essentially what he's done is kind of sutured or hybridized different references to artists, I think the 52 artists who are participating in Gallery Weekend, and kind of combine them, or references to the work in these different paintings. And the initials on the bottom refer to the kind of combinations of the artists and the references to their work. And the exhibition is called Frankenstein, and Frankenstein's kind of like the what's the word? The guiding spirit, let's say, of the show, and I think that's really interesting and complex as well. But there's still something about it like I don't quite understand, and I think a big part of that for me has to do with a certain, and I mean this in the best possible sense, but a certain not quiteness, in the sense that like I feel like there's a lot of different references to, for instance, maybe the most obvious is institutional critique. But for me, it's like playing with institutional critique, but it's not quite institutional critique. I would say the same thing about painting. You know, it's obviously referencing painting, but it's not quite painting in the traditional sense. I would say as well that there's allusions toward appropriation. Appropriation as like a tradition or an aesthetic, but it's not quite appropriation, since there is this kind of hybridization. Also, by the same token, it's not quite flattery or imitation, and it's not quite parody, but it's kind of all of these things at once. And I think this is really interesting, and I think this kind of accounts for a certain level of resistance of like, where exactly do you put this? Where do you situate it? Yeah, so I think before we kind of discuss these different topics, maybe the best thing to do is speak about the process, both like on a conceptual level and then physically, like how you made these works.
Yes. So let's say there is a prologue was like an experience I had a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago, and a friend of mine, great curator, came to the studio and we talk a bit, and he says, "Oh, Paolo, I really want to make this exhibition with you, where there is this piece, where inside you have this other and this other piece," and he basically mixed 3 pieces of mine all in once. And I loved these things because it somehow remains sticking in my head, this looseness that the desire might have when you like think or try to follow your desire in a certain way. You risk sometimes to create new shape, and that somehow remains living in my brain. And after Sabine, when she invited me to the gallery weekend, I started to think about my experience that night. It was 1 year ago. It was pretty crazy, and I thought about, okay, probably what's happened is that maybe a person come to the city and they start to see maybe 50 galleries in one day, and in the evening we'll have maybe some bad wine, drink too much, eat too little, and will be maybe in his hotel around 2 o'clock in the morning, not able to sleep because confused and frustrated for something. And so you maybe look at the TV and you maybe see like an horror movie, like maybe Frankenstein, and you start to think, wow, that's like my life, sounds like. And you fall asleep and you start to mix all the references you saw during the day, all the exhibition you saw, and it became like a sort of crazy hybrid in your brain, and you wake up from this nightmare and you think, wow, what's going on? That's gallery weekend, you know? So this is a bit the landscape on which I was moving. And to recall what Chris was saying, so the context of Gallery Weekend for me was crucial, not only in terms of the list of artists, but also in terms of this sort of macro structure, who is including also not only the gallery, but all the integration that the city has with the fashion industry, with the tourism. And so I start to consider the list of a Gallery Weekend artist as the main subject of the Gallery Weekend. Something who gave somehow on the first place visibility to the work is appear on this strange list, who is constructed on very unpredictable parameter, who of course deal a lot with the desire, instinct, what you think can work. And for me it was enough provocative, this context, to consider to a bit work on it. And so I imaged that the fictional curator of this craziness could be Dr. Victor Frankenstein. And so you can see at the entrance of the gallery in the office a portrait of him. It's like taken by the first actor who impersonated Victor Frankenstein in the famous movie. It looks like a little bit me, I know that. And that was again a little hybrid that was coming out. And I thought, okay, I will play if, as a curator, like if Victor Frankenstein will be the one taking over. And so I completely lose any possible rationality, and I just try to play on my instinct and desire. So there are no real reason why works match together apart from my obsession for certain detail. So I start to collect images of the all artists invited, and I let them sleep in my folder, start to make drawing, think about, but the choice was never related to anything logic or rational. It was really pure instinct manifestation. What was remaining stick in my brain as obsession, as a nightmare. And so I start after to compose and collapse these elements from various artists according to morphology of spaces, absurdity, monstrosity, nonsense, and the result is this series of 19 pieces where all time you have like 2, 3, 4, 5 artist works collapsing into another, creating this sort of new shape. The way in which I realize them is again very, very emotional. So I like the idea to use just 2 basic colors, like orange or red and blue, with a bit like this simple complementary color that you can use like a school, you know, to say, to sign things, to take notes. And also the way in which I use the painting was something very close like to graphonage, like when you are on the phone maybe talking or discussing about an exhibition and you start to take notes, to doodle, to make drawings. And so again, what you see is something very, very somehow fresh, instinctual, but again the technique in itself is like cheating on you. Because from distance you might think that it's like a watercolor on paper, mounted on canvas. And again you can think, okay, probably use a paper mounted on canvas, so it's more expensive, you know, classic gallery weekend trick. But you get closer and say, no, it's like fresco. Because your paper cannot do that. But after you look at on the side, you say, wow, it's too thin, what's that? And all of a sudden, you don't know anymore what you are looking for. So your sand painting again fall apart. If you touch the surface, it's extremely sleek, like a ghost. And that was for me like again a way to play with the imagination of the viewer as well, to destabilize a bit certain painting. All the time the initial of the artist is impressed on the canvas. So when you see like 3 letters means like 3 artists, when you see 5 letters means 5 artists. And again, if you think about the relation and integration that the Gallery Weekend has with the fashion industry, the idea to play the brand and the logo of these works was interesting to me. So this sort of imaginary who somehow relate to the context of the Gallery Weekend is played through the technique. Yeah, in this way. Did I answer to you or?
Yeah, definitely. I want to. I think it would be interesting to talk about like where this fits into your work with regard to other projects. But maybe before I do, one thing I noticed while you were speaking was like the kind of moving target, or the sense of like who Dr. Frankenstein is in this project, because in the beginning Dr. Frankenstein was the viewer who goes home and kind of watches TV and then falls asleep and then creates this, and then at one point Dr. Frankenstein is a kind of fictional curator, and then at another point you're Dr. Frankenstein. So like who, and it's funny because I don't know, like looking at this exhibition, there is this sense of like hubris, you know, like the sense that of hubris of like in a way kind of trying to author, like preemptively author Gallery Weekend by including everybody and like making their work for them, so to speak. And it's funny, like I want to attach that hubris to you as an artist, as like this kind of hubristic authorial position, and at the same time it's interesting how that itself also becomes, I think, an allegory for art making. I mean, Dr. Frankenstein is obviously a perfect allegory for the artist in terms of like creating this you know, quasi, almost human being, or kind of not quite human being, to refer to what I was saying before, and also something that's kind of like borderline uncanny, and then actually, you know, trying to create life in this kind of totally unnatural fashion, and as such a kind of committing the crime of hubris. But it's funny, like the way you kind of you delegate to a certain degree authorship from like the viewer to you know, to this kind of imaginary curator, to yourself as an artist. And, I mean, this seems to be something that exists in other aspects of your work as well.
Yes, I mean, I consider this association something we can change, we can fluctuate from in different terms. That means that the entire free wall can be considered as a one unique installation, who can recall certain way to operate with images, who might remind you, for example, Aby Warburg methodology. So the different artists here are like placed into this sort of white panel in searching of certain possible friendship. So there is this sort of way of images to proceed through resemblance, through similarity, antipathy, sympathy, who recall to me this way to understand images that can relate to the figure of the artist, now as well to the figure of the viewer, as a participant of this exhibition, or the figure of the curator, because probably a curator as well has a tendency to find a relationship between the work in and of itself, so in relation to the space, to other work. So in a certain degree, this is a common playground. In that sense, I feel the connection between these three possible figures, Aby Warburg methodology. Yeah.
And could you maybe talk about this in reference to other projects like Secondo Stile?
Yes. Yes, let's say that what I'm interested is in trying to use painting on the threshold of curating. Means that never leave the painting to its autonomous context of the autonomous of art, but try always to profanate a bit the medium, trying to bring back to the use the painting in order to reintroduce life on it. So painting can become like a mental space where I curate exhibition. Painting can become like a physical space where I exhibit other artwork, like curating exhibition as well, or inviting other curator to curate their own exhibition inside my canvas space. Painting can become a magazine, like it happened in Caribbean last year. In a residence I did where there for the Davidoff we create a magazine about institutional criticism. So painting always is used as a sort of reference to address something else. And this sort of barbaric way to use a medium expresses a certain degree of freedom, I think. Because I'm able to indicate the painting as something else. In this sort of undescribed position that I like to take as an artist / curator / writer, allow me to play on the border of various disciplines, like matching them and being always a bit free to take one position, one role or another. So it's difficult now to talk probably about Secondo Stile because you don't see it, but try to image. The situation was this one. I was in Berlin. I was really happy to. I would like really to have a space and to have my own artisan space. But I didn't, I'm very terrible with bureaucracy and I'm getting really stressed by those things. So I didn't want to rent a normal room, but I was reading Cervantes' Don Quixote during that time. And Don Quixote one day woke up and decided to be a knight. Huh? So he built up his own equipment and he started a great adventure. And I thought that was possible for me to do the same. So I took one canvas, 3 meters x 4. I paint a room. The room was like the classic room that you can find in wedding, so with linoleum, a bit crappy, because that was very, very honestly what I would have paint as an artisan space. And I invited one artist to exhibit inside this painting. So literally, concretely hanging his own work on my canvas. And the evening was crazy. People start to say, oh wow, when is next? When is next? And so at that point I realized what was possible for me to run a program. So every month in Berlin for 1 year, I made one exhibition inviting all very young artists who never exhibit in town, or very old one, to come in town, exhibit. I was including always another artist or writer to write a press text and making an opening. And since a canvas space travels faster than a building, I was able to select the right space for the exhibition according to the context of the work. It might be like staircase of institution, like in the neglected space of the famous institution Köpenicker, or can be under a bridge, private apartment, whatever. All time I just needed like an electricity and some for light and a mailing list. So I started to activate this canvas as a real museum, as a real institution, calling myself like director. And at a certain point, I realized that artists needed different spaces, so I opened a second space where I could exhibit also sculpture. It was a Bedouin tent, because I had a carpet on the floor, so I could exhibit two artists, like one on the wall and one on the floor. And at a certain point, I opened a third one. It was like a bathroom for talk, for only artist statement or curator statement. This bathroom is pretty funny because it's called Mott, and is the most equipped bathroom in New York office at the end of the 19th century, projected by the Mott Ironwork, but is a company that later produced the pissoir that Marcel Duchamp appropriated. So it's a sort of pre-conceptual bathroom, pre-ready-made bathroom, but aimed to introduce the public to various ideological spectrum of future transformation in the form of talk, storytelling. So I started to make exhibition with them, invited curators. So at the point I was like, wow, it was too much, I was starting to get stressed. And the canvas was like without stretcher bar, and so I said, fuck it, I will fold it. I folded and I gave it to a friend of mine, Luca Cerizza, who went to Birmania, to India, because he got married, and he made like this honeymoon with MySpace on his backpack, organizing an exhibition in India. And that was like a really crucial revealing point, because I understand that I could have like developed curating as a sort of storytelling. I was telling the story of my space around, I was not having any more control of my painting, but at the same time I was starting to have a program made by someone else. And all of a sudden you see that what I mean about freedom. This painting was becoming like resonance for other artists as well. And that was like with me at home, watching TV. With me having not to have to control, lose ego, for me was important. You know?
Yeah, it's interesting because it seems like initially like a pretty antagonistic position. I mean, antagonistic vis-a-vis the artists, and then also curators and curating in general.
Yeah.
In the sense that it seems like they're kind of scrambling the codes of agency within both. I mean, an artist gets to exhibit, but they exhibit in your work, they're contextualized within your work, and then a curator can be involved, but it seems like they have to forfeit a certain level of agency, or that you're always included as an artist. But I like this idea that it actually takes on a life of its own, independently of you, even though it's still your work.
Yeah, I mean, recently I work on a show in Bologna. It's open now. In this gallery in the Foscherari, with the gallery where the Arte Povera exhibition by Celand was organized, a very nice place. We made a show, and I call myself curatorial medium. So I don't appear as an artist, I don't appear as a real curator. I like to be into this sort of between space. I could not like write space Paolo, because that would be a bit too weird. But curatorial medium was like, I thought, interesting etiquette, because medium recall matter, items, and I like to produce things anyway. But I like to work also on this display and exhibition design strategies, because I think again are allowing painting to reinvent himself a bit as a possibility, freedom and expression. So in that sense there is a certain degree of antagonism, because nobody will ever feel threatened by a painting, you know? You hang on the sofa and you're happy, normally. But all of a sudden, if the painting becomes belligerent, is fascinating, because people don't care. And all of a sudden, you are running an institution with free canvas space around the world. And that's give me some good energy, good feeling.
Yeah. Medium's funny as well vis-a-vis Frankenstein, because for me it makes me think of like a spiritual medium.
Yeah.
You know, like you're channeling. Yeah, I guess that something else that interests me as well is the relationship to autonomy, which obviously this kind of work is really antagonistic to ideas of autonomy.
Yeah.
But I was wondering, like, how do you imagine the afterlife of these works? Like, how do you see them after Gallery Weekend? I mean, they have such a specific context.
Yeah, but you know, everything more or less has a context. So they can be probably considered in their singularity. Is anyway an encounter between artists. So what is the fact that the context will change doesn't scare me. No, but and also I don't. I think you always need pretext to start to work on something. This is the function of the work, of course, belongs to the context in which this work is growing. But at the same time, if the work is good enough, we'll be able to be dialectical towards other kind of landscape or context or situation. So let's cross the finger. I can't have a full control of what will happen, and I don't even want to have. You know, it's like I have other project upcoming. So the problem is trying all time to break this autonomies for me. The autonomy of art is a bit a tricky question because it was constructed under certain circumstances, and I think it's very interesting now to break this grammatic of self-references and try to reintroduce usership. So it means like reinvent the possible use, but thanks to manipulation that you can do with painting, for example. In this case, like hybridizing painting with different role, curating, printing, magazine, space. And this is a way to not diminish the value of the grammatic of art in itself, but add again life. So crossing discipline is important. You know, autonomous of art has been defined in a moment in which it was important to take some distance from the church, from the religion, because they have the tendency to cover everything, and so Kant needed to find the disinterest spectatorship as a main theme. And I think now is interesting to re-enchant the world, to re-engage this multitude of discipline in order to refresh a bit the art context. So a reconquest of space, like Pierre Bourdieu would say, to make it aulic.
Interesting. Yeah, I think maybe one more question or one more thing to discuss, and then we could open up to the audience, is I guess the relationship to Gallery Weekend itself.
Yeah.
And how you speak about it in terms of like institutional critique. And I guess you already touched upon this to a certain degree. I mean, especially with regard to logos, like this idea of branding, and then you come along and you rebrand, you create these kind of hybrid mutant fake brands. But I mean, is this, according to you, is this antagonistic toward Gallery Weekend as an institution?
No, it's not antagonistic. It's not antagonistic. But there is a certain level of awareness, at least concerning the context on which these works and this show operate within. So, as a micro level, this city festival and this all this interest that has the city to promote Gallery Weekend, and so this various level of visibility that the work has in relation also to the tourism and the fashion, as we says, who can be as a macro level more the way in which an artwork function on the capitalist, the capital society that we have highly experienced nowadays. So this awareness at least was part of it. I don't like the idea of institutional critique as a way to don't make the work or negate yourself. I think it's interesting anyway, the big heritage that we have nowadays is to understand the circumstances on which we operate. And so that is the best link and connection and heritage that I have with a great tradition of institutional critique. Yeah. But you can also have how you say, Aufhebung, over surpass and conservation of the various value of institutional critique into something more propositive and new. A different kind of responsibility, who of course is based on the understanding of the context on which an artist operates.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Because like my understanding of institutional critique is about kind of disclosing the mechanisms of power, like how that functions. And for me, this work is much more the order of disclosing the mechanisms of, or a certain mechanism of gallery weekend.
Yeah.
You know, and as such, the kind of conditions of production. Yeah. You know, maybe we should open it up to you guys if you have any questions or doubts.
Paolo, I was wondering if, I find this, you talked about the two sort of different directions of autonomy and with on the scale of sort of not only autonomy but also a kind of nomadic presentation of something that would otherwise be very static and very kind of unmoving and very defined in its presence. And I was wondering how you felt compromised, or if you felt any compromise whatsoever, about creating the works for this show. And in a way, to me, they have this feeling of a kind of memento, like a token that you would, even as a collector, kind of take away from a very specific moment, and a very defined, and they don't really have a sort of, or do you feel maybe they do have a life and a travel after this point, but did you feel compromised in your practice or challenged in your practice to create something that was very rigid in its time frame and its specificity, as opposed to something that could be folded up in a backpack of your friend on a trip to India?
Yeah. No, that's very different, but in this case I try to work on my nightmares. Nightmare I have an end at a certain point. You wake up and say, it's over. Seriously, it was like the way in which the images has been processed was really like through obsession. And it was interesting to me, try to lose, I try to do everything to lose control in my life. Maybe I'm a control freak, so I try to lose control all way possible. Leaving my canvas space, becoming platform for other curator or artists, trying to renounce to certain degree of control that I have, accepting how the images was coming into my brain instinctively. This is something I'm trying really to work hard on, because otherwise I have the tendency I really love create topology and cosmo and connection, and I really love magic renaissance, so everything is linked to me. So from this I can go there, I can reach you from this glass. That's the way in which I proceed. And I'm very careful after of the possible nuances of these links. And sometimes I feel a bit threatened, because I feel like, okay, this is a bit solitude way to proceed. And so break up and just let it go was the best way for me to nurture myself as well a bit, I think.
Yeah, well, I was interested in this question of piece about the afterlife of the works of the show, and of course it's very interesting link to quotation of Warburg, now that you made the hanging of the show. So the afterlife for him was quite an important element in culture. And so this relation of the context, and of course, if you think about Warburg and Palazzo Schifanoia,
Yeah.
and that the meaning was disappeared, and so basically also you have this enigmatic combination. And if you bring out the context, no, then this meaning is a kind of secret that maybe can be discovered in a study in the future. But then what is interesting actually is also this connection with Warburg and the title of the exhibition, that is Frankenstein, and this idea to make this life with these different components. So I was quite intrigued also about this combination of Warburg and Frankenstein, and how much actually these two elements of Warburg, like putting together very different elements, and Frankenstein to create a life from different parts of a body, were actually very close. Also, I think they are also contemporary at the time of this invention of a new life, and so and a kind of more, the Frankenstein more different kind of culture, the collective culture, but it's actually they are very close to the idea to generate a new life with different elements. So I like very much to put together these elements. And I don't know how much you thought about this.
No, of course, it's like everything nowadays is a crazy hybrid, I think. No? It's the most liberating forces, the one of destroy border, melting to each other, transgender shape. This is what give me some hope for the future, in a certain term. So is about Scotland and UK together. It's like Frankenstein, no? Like Mary Shelley. So is always the outcome of is something who has certain imposition. But for me, the interesting aspect of mix Warburg and Frankenstein was like have a grammatic who was based on morphology of speeches and nonsense to approach the main protagonist of Gallery Weekend with this list. So instead of using like reference to astrology, like in Palazzo Schifanoia, I use reference to madness, I guess. No, loss of control, obsession, nightmare, everything, a desire, seduction, sexuality. That was the moving force. Of course, the Warburg give you the possibility to work on these various images, reinventing and refounding possible connection but relationship. Yes? No?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I'm more interested in that from an allegorical perspective, insofar as like Frankenstein becomes a metaphor or allegory of the artist. And I guess when we first discussed this work, I thought of Manet as well, in terms of like disclosing, I mean, this is very different and different from Warburg, but disclosing the way images are always hybridizations and quotations of other images.
But Yankee Bird is motivated by Bruegel painting.
Oh yeah, exactly.
So here we miss a B, maybe Bruegel.
But I guess
KB.
But I guess also, I mean, maybe you already answered this to a certain degree, but I guess I'm interested in the extent to which you see Frankenstein as an allegorical figure.
Yeah.
I mean, is that something that's interesting for you already?
Allegorical or symbolical? That's the question. Allegorical or symbolical? Because at the end is not only a form of commentary, like allegoric form might lead to.
Mm-hmm. There
is something more pregnant on the base on which we approach the daily life nowadays. No, we are deeply into experiencing this sort of hybridization of various shape into a new one. So it's not anymore a comment, it's not anymore like a decision, it's a matter of fact that we live into this sort of magmatic zone where everything is connected to and fluctuating. It's falling apart. We are like amoebas, I don't know, and this is our power, this integration of the ego, mostly. Yeah. Ego is over.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah.
I would say Frankenstein is a symbolical element to me. It's like probably very well describing our condition in this late capitalistic society. Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting because it is less of the order of commentary than any kind of materialism.
Yeah.
Which is...
But also animism is a sort of Frankenstein because it's like introduce life into something but not necessarily might be perceived as alive. So it's a sensitive version of materialism, animism. No? And in that sense it's like I try to, not this way to make something dead, have life again. So the relationship between Frankenstein and animism can be a new show. Interesting. Thank you for making me think about it.
So...
Shaman Frankenstein.
Yeah. Maybe other questions, comments?
Maybe just to frame it with a practical little story out of my experience to be in here since a few days, not being able to see anything of the gallery weekend because I'm here. It's very interesting to see these works because they become to me the gallery weekend which is out there, and I'm always surprised when I follow social media and what the artists of course in reality do of new works in their galleries. And I really feel I'm in this Frankenstein brain in here. It really confuses me completely, and slowly, because I get stories from people, they have seen this and that, they show me images on their phone. It's very image driven nowadays, you see a lot of information, and then I have these images, and I definitely become in the state of Frankenstein and Paolo were thinking that everything kind of merges together, and I'm trying to remember what is up now in the galleries and what's around there and what's here and what's this reality and what's the reality out there. And yeah, so it definitely for me the story Paolo told me before, I really liked it, but it comes very true to me, this happening of image connections and chaos and slowly turning into hybrids. Of course, seeing the hybrids makes you also think in those terms much stronger. So Paolo probably also created a starting point for me to think in those terms. And so it's very interesting for me to go next week around and see my colleagues' shows and and understand a bit more. Because in 3 days it's exactly what Paolo described, something overlaps and creates. So yeah, thank you very much, Chris, for coming here and for the text and for this really nice talk. It was very interesting. A lot of questions I had myself and didn't have the time to speak to Paolo about it and wasn't aware of it. And thank you, Paolo, for making this happen. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.